Everyone tells you that social media is harmless, that posting a selfie or a coffee cup or a picture of your dog in the park is just sharing your life with your friends, that the strangers who scroll past your photos are just numbers, just shadows, just background noise in a feed that nobody really pays attention to. But what nobody tells you is that every photo you post is a tiny piece of a map. The corner of a building, the brand of your coffee, the logo on your gym bag, the angle of the sunlight through your window. And there are people in this world who do nothing all day but collect those pieces and put them together and learn the exact shape of a stranger's life and decide, very quietly, that they are going to step into it. This story might make you delete a few of your photos tonight and check your privacy settings and think very hard about who is on your follower list and whether you actually know them. My name is Rachel. I was 25 years old and I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in a nice part of Minneapolis, Minnesota, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company, going to a bear class 3 times a week, walking my little rescue dog every morning before work, and posting pictures of all of it on Instagram to about 800 followers, most of whom were people I had gone to college with or worked with at some point. My account was public because I had read somewhere that public accounts grew faster, and I had this small dream of becoming a lifestyle influencer on the side. And I posted a lot, probably 4 or 5 times a week. My morning latte, my dog at the dog park, my outfit before a date, my view from my bear studio after class. And I thought I was being careful. I never posted my address. I never tagged my exact gym. I never said the name of the bar where I met my friends. I was 25, and I thought that was enough. It started with a comment. I had posted a photo of myself in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. Just me holding a latte, smiling at the camera. The kind of photo I had posted 100 times before. And a few hours later, I got a comment from an account I did not recognize. A man's name, a profile picture of a sunset, no other photos, no bio, and the comment said, "You look really nice in green. That color suits you." I was wearing a green sweater in the photo. I almost did not think about it. I get comments from strangers sometimes. That is what a public account is. But something about it stuck with me for a few minutes. The way it was phrased, "That color suits you," like he had thought about it, like he had an opinion. And I clicked on his profile, and there was nothing there, just an empty account. And I shrugged it off, and I went on with my day. The next week, I posted a photo of my dog at the dog park. Just my dog in the grass, a normal, cute photo. And the same account commented again, and this time he said, "Pepper looks happy today. She must love that park." My dog's name is Pepper. I had never said her name in any caption. I was sure of it. I had checked. I had a thing about not putting her name online because I had read once that people use pet names to guess passwords. And I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand, and I scrolled back through every photo I had ever posted of her, and her name was not in a single caption, and I started to feel a little cold. I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe he had heard me at the dog park. Maybe he was someone I had passed on a walk. Maybe I had said her name out loud near someone with this username and forgotten. And I deleted his comments, and I blocked the account. And I told myself it was over. A new account started commenting 2 days later. Different name, different sunset profile picture, but the comments were the same flavor, the same tone. "That yellow looks beautiful on you. You must have had a long day. That bookstore is one of my favorites too." And every comment had a piece of information that I had not put in the post. And every time I blocked one account, a new one would appear within a few days, and the comments kept coming. I started to get paranoid, but the kind of paranoid where you know something is wrong, but you cannot prove it. Where every time you try to explain it to someone, they tell you to just make your account private and stop worrying. And so I made my account private, and for about 2 weeks, the comments stopped, and I thought I had won. Then I got a follow request. The username was a string of random letters and numbers, the profile picture was a flower, and the bio said only 2 words, "Hi Rachel." And I sat there on my couch staring at my phone, and I did not approve the request. I did not deny it. I just sat there, and I felt that same cold feeling in my chest from the day he had named my dog. I deleted the request. A new follow request came the next day from a different account. I deleted that one too, and another came, and another. And within a week, I had deleted 12 follow requests from 12 different accounts, all with the same kind of empty profile, all with bios that mentioned my name, or my dog's name, or the color of a sweater I had worn. And I finally did the thing I should have done from the very beginning. I called my older brother, who worked in IT for a hospital, and I told him everything. He drove over that night with his laptop, and he sat at my kitchen table, and he asked me to log into my Instagram account. And he asked me to send him every screenshot I had saved of every comment. And he spent about an hour scrolling through my old posts in silence. And when he finally looked up at me, he had a face I had never seen on him before. A face that scared me more than anything had scared me up to that point. He told me to come look at my own feed. He had pulled up about 30 of my photos, and he had been writing notes next to each one. And he showed me how a photo of my latte from a window seat in a coffee shop had a reflection in the window that showed the building across the street, which was a very specific building with a very specific sign. And you could find that coffee shop on Google Maps in about 10 seconds. He showed me a photo I had posted of my Bear Studios reception area, just for a second, in a story I had thought I had deleted, and the studio's logo was visible on the wall, and the studio had only one location. He showed me a selfie I had taken in my car after work, and in the rearview mirror you could see the corner of a parking ramp, and that parking ramp was the parking ramp at my office building, and you could match it from photos online. He showed me a picture of my apartment building's lobby that I had posted the day I moved in, almost 2 years ago, and the building's address was visible on a small sign by the elevator. He showed me a picture of my dog in the hallway outside my apartment door, and you could see my unit number on the door behind her. He kept going for almost 20 minutes, and by the end of it, I was sitting at my own kitchen table in my own apartment, shaking, because somewhere out there a stranger had been doing exactly this for months, going through my photos, taking notes, building a map, and he knew where I worked, where I lived, where I worked out, where I bought coffee, what kind of car I drove, what time I walked my dog, what days I went to bear class, what color sweaters I owned. He knew all of it. My brother told me to do 3 things that night. He told me to delete every photo I had ever posted. He told me to file a report with the police. And he told me to assume, until proven otherwise, that this person knew where I slept. I did all 3. The police took a report, but they told me what they always tell women in these situations, that no crime had technically been committed, that comments on social media were not illegal, that follow requests were not illegal, that I should keep documenting everything, and that if anything escalated to in-person contact, I should call them immediately. It escalated 3 weeks later. I came out of my bear class on a Tuesday night. It was about 8 in the evening. The sun was just going down, and my car was in the small lot behind the studio. And when I got to my car, there was an envelope under my windshield wiper. A plain white envelope, no name, no writing on the outside. And I stood there in the parking lot for a long time before I picked it up. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. On the paper was a list, typed, single-spaced, 2 columns long, and it was a list of every place I had been in the past 2 weeks, with dates, with times, with the addresses, including places I had not posted about, including the dentist appointment I had on a Wednesday afternoon, including the dinner I had with my mother at her house in the suburbs, including the late-night gas station run I had made at almost midnight on a Saturday because I could not sleep. He had been following me in person. He had been doing it for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer, and the photos had only ever been a starting point. The photos had only been how he had found me, And once he had found me, he had simply started watching me with his own eyes. And I had not noticed, not once. Not in a parking lot, not on a walk, not at a gas station at midnight. I called the police from the parking lot of the Bear Studio. I sat in my car with the doors locked, and an officer came out within 15 minutes. And this time the report was different. This time it was stalking. This time it was a crime. And within 48 hours they had pulled the gas station footage, and they had a face. A man in his 30s, average height, baseball cap, dark jacket. A face I had never seen before in my life. A face that meant nothing to me. They identified him within a week. His name was Evan. He was 34. He lived about an hour away in a town I had never been to. He worked from home as a remote customer service rep. He had no criminal record. He had no connection to me of any kind. He had simply found my Instagram account on the Explore page one day almost a year ago, and he had decided I was the one. And he had spent the next 11 months learning everything he could. He was arrested at his apartment. The police found a binder, a literal 3-ring binder with printed photos of me, with maps, with schedules, with screenshots of every comment I had ever posted on every platform he could find. And they found a duffel bag in the trunk of his car with rope and duct tape and zip ties. And an officer told me later, very gently, off the record, that they had probably caught him in the last week or two before he was going to do something, and that I should consider myself extremely lucky. I do not feel lucky. He took a plea deal for stalking and a few related charges, and he is in prison for the next 6 years. And I have already been told that I will be notified when he is released, and that I should consider what I will do at that point. I moved across the country. I live in Portland, Oregon now. I work for a different company. I drive a different car. I go to a different gym. And I have one social media account, and it is private, and it has 11 followers, and they are all family. And I do not post photos of my new dog, and I do not post photos of my apartment, and I do not post photos of myself in any color of sweater. I learned something in that parking lot in Minneapolis that I want to leave you with tonight. You think you are sharing your life with your friends. You are not. You are leaving a trail of breadcrumbs through the woods, and somewhere behind you, very quietly, somebody you have never met is following the trail. And the only question, the only one that ever matters, is whether you notice him before he reaches you.
Everyone tells you that the office is a safe place, that your coworkers are just people you share a parking lot with, that the worst thing that can happen at work is a bad performance review or a microwave fish incident, and the moment you walk out the front door at 5 o'clock, you are free, and they are out of your life until Monday morning. But what nobody tells you is that the people you sit next to for 40 hours a week know more about you than you realize. Your schedule, your habits, your favorite lunch spot, the bar you mentioned on a Thursday afternoon, the gym you said you might join, the name of the woman you went on a date with last weekend. And there are people in this world who are not actually there to do their job. They are there to study you and to follow you home when nobody is paying attention. This story might make you think very carefully about what you say in the break room tomorrow, and what is on your screen when you walk away from your desk, and which of your coworkers are a little too interested in your weekend. My name is Aaron. I was 28 years old, and I had just started a new job as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas, working in a big open-floor office downtown, the kind with standing desks and free cold brew and a ping-pong table that nobody actually used. I had moved to Austin from Dallas for the job. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment about 10 minutes from the office. I did not know anybody in the city when I started, and so for the first few weeks I made a real effort to be friendly at work. I went to the team happy hours. I introduced myself to people in the elevator. I said yes when somebody asked if I wanted to grab lunch, because I figured that was how you made friends as an adult in a new city.
There was a guy on my team named Brandon. He was about my age, maybe a year or two older. Average height, average looking, soft-spoken. The kind of guy you would pass on the street and forget about 10 seconds later. And he was one of the first people who introduced himself to me on my first day, and he offered to show me around the office, and he took me to get coffee at the place across the street. And on the walk back, he asked me a lot of questions about myself, where I had moved from, where I lived now, whether I had family in Austin, whether I was seeing anyone. And I answered all of them, because that is what you do on your first day at a new job. He seemed nice. He seemed like the kind of guy who was just trying to be friendly to the new hire, and for the first month or two I was glad he was around, because he was the only person at the office who consistently said hello to me in the morning and asked how my weekend was, and remembered small things I had mentioned in passing. Then something started, and at first I thought it was just a coincidence. I went to a small whiskey bar on a Friday night about 6 weeks into the job, a place I had read about online, a quiet place with leather booths and one bartender, and about an hour after I sat down, Brandon walked in. He looked surprised to see me. He laughed. He said something like, "No way, you come here too?" And he sat down at the bar near my booth, and we ended up talking for about an hour, and I paid for the drinks because he insisted I buy his since I had taken his usual seat. And I went home thinking it was a funny coincidence and a small Austin world. 2 weekends later, I went to a different bar, a brewery on the east side of the city, a place I had not told anybody at work about, and about 40 minutes after I got there, Brandon walked in.
He laughed again. He said something about the beer being good there, and he sat down with me. And I started to feel a small, quiet wrongness in my stomach. The kind of wrongness you cannot put words to. But I was new in town, I did not have many friends, and I told myself I was being weird, that Austin was not that big a city, that the bar scene was kind of a circuit and people ran into each other. The next weekend, I drove 45 minutes outside the city to a small town with a famous barbecue place, the kind of place tourists go on Saturdays, and I stood in line for almost 2 hours, and when I finally sat down at a picnic table with my tray of brisket, somebody sat down across from me with their own tray, and it was Brandon. He smiled at me. He said, "Small world," and he started eating. And I sat across from him and I ate my barbecue and I made small talk about work, but my hands were shaking a little under the table because no part of that was a coincidence. That barbecue place was nowhere. It was 45 minutes from anything. I had not told a single person at the office I was going there. I had not even posted about it on social media. And a man I worked with was sitting across from me eating ribs and asking me how my week had been. I went home that afternoon and I sat on my couch and I tried to think back through every interaction I had ever had with Brandon, and I tried to figure out how he kept knowing where I was, and I could not come up with a single answer that made sense. That Monday morning, I started paying attention. I noticed for the first time that Brandon's desk was about 30 feet from mine, and that he had a clear line of sight to my monitor when I sat down in my chair. And I noticed that every morning when I got to my desk, he was already there, and he would glance over when I logged in and he would say, "Good morning." And I had never thought twice about it, but now I started thinking about it constantly. I shared my work calendar with the team, the way most people did. The company used a shared calendar system. Anybody on my team could pull up my calendar and see my meetings. That was normal. That was how everybody operated. But I had also been putting personal events on that calendar. My dentist appointment, my haircut, the dinner I had with my brother when he flew in from Dallas, the date I went on with a woman I had met at a coffee shop, all of it. Because I am the kind of person who needs everything in one place or I forget it. I changed all of those events to private that week. Within 2 weeks, Brandon stopped showing up at places. I went to 3 different bars, a concert, a hiking trail outside the city, and a friend's birthday party, and Brandon was not at any of them. And I felt a wave of relief,
and I told myself maybe I had been imagining the pattern. Maybe it really had been coincidences. Maybe my brain had been connecting dots that were not actually connected. Then one morning, I got to work early, around 7:30, almost an hour before most people came in, and I walked past Brandon's desk on my way to the coffee machine, and I noticed a stack of paper sitting next to his keyboard, and I glanced down at it without really meaning to, and I stopped walking. It was my calendar. He had printed out my work calendar, the previous week's worth, with all of my events on it, and somebody had handwritten notes next to each event in blue pen. Notes like went, did not go, parking lot full, sat at bar, left at 9:40. And there were dates going back at least a month, page after page, a thick stack. And at the very top of the stack was the current week's calendar with notes already on the events that had not happened yet. Notes like, check Friday, weekend trip ? I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. I did not touch the papers. I did not take a photo. I did not do anything. I just walked back to my desk and I sat down, and I felt my whole body go cold. And I sat at my desk for the next hour pretending to work. And Brandon came in around 8:30, and he said good morning to me, and I said good morning back. And I watched out of the corner of my eye as he tucked the stack of papers into a folder and put the folder in his bag. I went to HR that afternoon. I told the woman in HR everything. The bars, the brewery, the barbecue place, the printed calendar, and she listened. And she took notes, and she asked me if I had any photos of the printed calendar, and I told her no. And she told me that without proof there was very little she could do, but that she would document the report, and that she would speak with Brandon's manager, and that she would also speak with the office security team about reviewing badge access logs, because every time somebody printed something on the office printer, the badge log recorded it. The badge logs came back the next morning. Brandon had been printing my calendar every weekday morning between 7 and 7:30 for 8 months, going back almost to the day I had started. 8 months, every single weekday. The HR woman called me into a conference room and showed me the log, page after page of timestamps, and she told me that this was now a security incident, that they were going to escalate it, that I should not say anything to Brandon, that I should not change my routine, and that I should let them handle the next steps. And I drove home that night, and I sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for almost an hour before I went inside, because I did not want to be in any space where he might know how to find me. The confrontation happened the next day. I was at my desk around 2 in the afternoon, and I saw 2 men in suits walk into the office and speak quietly to my manager, and my manager pointed at Brandon's desk. And the 2 men walked over to Brandon, and they asked him to come with them. And Brandon stood up, and as he was walking past my desk, he stopped, and he turned, and he looked at me. He did not look angry. He did not look surprised. He smiled at me, a small, calm smile, and he said, very quietly, almost like he was telling me a secret, he said, "You should have kept it on the calendar, Aaron. This is going to make Friday harder for both of us." And then he walked out of the office with the 2 men, and I never saw him again. The investigation that followed turned up a lot of things I learned about over the course of the next few weeks, from HR, from the police, from a victim advocate they connected me with. And the picture they put together was not what I had expected. Brandon had a history. He had done this before at 2 previous jobs in 2 previous cities to 2 previous coworkers, both men, both around my age, both new hires. And in both cases, he had been let go quietly, without charges, because the companies had not wanted the publicity, and he had simply moved to another city and gotten another job and started again. Police searched his apartment, and they found 3 large file boxes, one for each of us, with calendars, with maps, with photographs taken from a distance, with notes about our routines, with detailed write-ups of our weekends. And in the box that had my name on it, on the very top of the stack, was a printed map of my apartment building, with my unit circled, and a list of times I usually arrive home on Friday evenings. He had not been planning to follow me to a bar that Friday. He had been planning to be waiting for me when I got home. He took a plea deal on stalking charges. He is in prison now for several years, and I was told he will not be allowed to live in Texas when he is released. And I was told to be cautious for the rest of my life, because people like him do not stop, they only relocate. I changed jobs. I left that company. I left Austin. I moved back to Dallas. I work fully remote now. I have not been inside an open-floor office in almost 3 years, and I do not put anything on a shared calendar. Not a doctor's appointment, not a haircut, not a coffee with a friend. And I keep my personal calendar on a paper notebook in a drawer in my kitchen, and that is the only place my schedule exists. I learned something in that office that I want to leave you with tonight. The last thing I will say. The stranger watching you from across a parking lot is dangerous, but at least you can see him. The man eating lunch 10 feet from your desk for 8 months, asking how your weekend was, smiling at you when you walk in every morning, is a different kind of dangerous. Because by the time you finally notice him, he already knows everything. And the only thing left for him to learn is what you sound like when you are afraid.
Everyone tells you that the world is full of strangers, that every coffee shop and every gas station and every grocery store is a sea of faces you will never see again, that you can walk through a city of 1 million people and not register a single one of them, and that they will not register you either. But what nobody tells you is that the human brain is built to recognize faces, that some people lock onto a face the way a hunter locks onto an animal, that 1 second of accidental eye contact in the wrong place at the wrong time can be enough for a stranger to decide that you belong to them now. And once they have decided that, you do not have to give them your name, you do not have to give them your number, you do not have to give them anything at all, because the only thing they ever needed from you, you already gave them when you looked up from your phone. This story might make you keep your eyes down at the coffee shop tomorrow and skip the small talk at the gas pump and notice for the first time who is looking at you when you think nobody is. My name is Sarah. I was 27 years old, and I was living in a small house I rented with 2 roommates in a quiet neighborhood in Boise, Idaho, working as a veterinary technician at an animal clinic about 15 minutes from my house, going to yoga twice a week, getting coffee every morning at the same little drive-through stand on my way to work. I was not on social media very much. I had a private Instagram with maybe 30 followers, all family and close friends. I was not the kind of person who posted my location. I did not check into places. I was, by every reasonable measure, a careful person. The kind of person who reads articles about online safety and actually changes her settings. None of that mattered. It started on a Thursday afternoon in October. I had taken a half-day off from the clinic for a dentist appointment, and on my way home, I stopped at a small independent coffee shop near my dentist's office, a place I had never been to before, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu, and one barista with a lot of tattoos. I ordered a latte, I sat down by the window, and I scrolled through my phone for maybe 10 minutes, and at one point I looked up because I felt that prickle on the back of my neck that you sometimes feel when somebody is watching you. And across the room, there was a man sitting alone at a small table. A man maybe in his late 30s, blonde hair, beard, average build, wearing a denim jacket. And he was looking right at me. We made eye contact for maybe a second and a half. He did not smile. He did not look away, embarrassed the way most people do when you catch them looking. He just held the eye contact for that second and a half, and then he very slowly looked back down at his cup. And I felt that prickle again, and I told myself it was nothing, that strangers stare sometimes, that I had probably been making a weird face at my phone. And I finished my latte, and I left the coffee shop, and I drove home. And I did not think about him for the rest of the day. The next morning, I stopped at my regular drive-through coffee stand on my way to work.
And as I was pulling out onto the main road with my coffee in the cup holder, I glanced over at the gas station across the street. And at the pump closest to the road, leaning against a silver pickup truck, was the man from the coffee shop. He was looking at me. He was not pumping gas, he was doing nothing. He was just leaning against the truck, watching the cars come out of the coffee stand. And when our eyes met, he did not look away this time, he just kept looking. And I felt my hands get cold on the steering wheel. And I drove to work, and I told myself it was a coincidence, that Boise was a small city, that some guy who lived near my dentist also got gas in the same neighborhood I worked in, that this was nothing. I went the entire weekend without seeing him. On Monday night, I went to the grocery store after work, a Winco about 10 minutes from my house, and I was in the produce section picking out apples, and I felt that prickle on the back of my neck again, and I looked up, and across the produce section, near the bananas, was the man. He was not holding a basket. He was not holding any groceries. He was just standing there in the produce section looking at me. And when I looked at him, he did not pretend to be looking at fruit. He did not turn around. He just kept his eyes on me. And I felt my chest get tight. And I left my cart in the aisle and I walked very quickly to the front of the store and out to my car. And I locked the doors before I even put my keys in the ignition. And I sat in the parking lot for almost 10 minutes watching my mirrors before I drove home. And I did not see his truck, and I did not see him follow me. And I told myself I had to be losing my mind, because 3 sightings in a week of one man in a city of 200,000 people was statistically possible. And I was a logical person, and I was going to stop letting this scare me. He was on my street the next morning. I came out of my front door at 7:30 to walk to my car, and parked across the street, 2 houses down, was the silver pickup truck, and the man was sitting in the driver's seat, just sitting there. Not on his phone, not reading anything, just sitting in his truck looking at my house. When he saw me come out the front door, he did not start the engine, he did not drive away, he did not pretend to be doing anything else. He just lifted one hand off the steering wheel and he held it up flat against the inside of the windshield in a kind of slow, deliberate wave. And I went back inside the house, and I locked the door, and I called my older sister, and I cried into the phone for about 20 minutes before I could even tell her what was happening. She told me to call the police. I called the non-emergency line, and an officer came to the house within about an hour, and by the time he arrived, the silver pickup truck was gone. And I told the officer everything. The coffee shop, the gas station, the grocery store, the truck on my street, and the officer was very kind. He took notes. He asked me if I had ever spoken to this man, and I told him no, never, not a single word. And he asked me if I had given the man any of my information, my name, my number, my social media, anything at all. And I told him no, never, none of it. He sat in my living room for a long time looking at his notebook, and then he told me something that I have not been able to forget. He told me that the cases that scared him the most in 22 years on the job were not the ones where there was a clear motive, where the stalker was an ex or a coworker or somebody you had wronged, because in those cases at least you understood the shape of it, you understood why, you could trace it back to something. He told me the cases that scared him the most were the ones like this, where a stranger had picked you for no reason. Because if there was no reason, there was nothing you could do to take it back. You could not apologize. You could not undo it. You could not give them what they wanted because they did not want anything specific. They just wanted you, the version of you they had built in their head from 1.5 seconds of eye contact in a coffee shop. He told me to start documenting everything. Dates, times, photos if I could get them safely, the license plate of the truck, and he told me he would file a report and he would put extra patrols on my street for a week. And he told me to consider whether I had somewhere else I could stay, just for a little while. And he gave me his card. I got the license plate the next morning. The truck was back, parked in the same spot, 2 houses down, and I held my phone up against my bedroom window and I zoomed in and I took a photo of the plate, and I texted it to the officer, and within about 3 hours he called me back. And his voice was different on the phone, more careful, more flat. And he asked me if I was somewhere I could talk privately, and I told him I was at work.
and I went into the back office of the clinic and I closed the door. He told me the truck was registered to a man named Curtis, who was 41 years old, who lived in a small town about an hour outside of Boise, who had been arrested twice before in the past 10 years for stalking and harassment of 2 different women, both of whom he had encountered in public places, neither of whom he had ever spoken to, and both cases ended in restraining orders that he served jail time for violating.
The officer told me Curtis had been released from his last sentence about 14 months ago. He told me Curtis was not supposed to be in the Boise metro area as a condition of his release. He told me they were going to pick him up that afternoon, and they were going to do it carefully, because men like Curtis sometimes escalated when they realized they had been identified. And he told me to go stay with my sister that night, and he told me not to go home until he called me. They picked Curtis up at about 6 in the evening at a different gas station, the same one I had seen him at the morning after the coffee shop. And in the cab of his truck, they found a small notebook. And in that notebook were dates and times and locations. The coffee shop on Thursday afternoon, the drive-through coffee stand on Friday morning, the Winco on Monday evening, my street on Tuesday morning, my street on Wednesday morning, my workplace's parking lot, my yoga studio, my dentist's office, and the addresses of my 2 roommates, who he had clearly identified somehow, even though I had never met him, never told him anything about my life. I asked the officer afterward how Curtis had figured out where I lived when I had never spoken to him, when I had not told him anything, when I had only made eye contact with him once. The officer told me, very gently, that men like Curtis followed people from the first place they saw them, that Curtis had probably gotten in his truck the moment I left the coffee shop and had simply driven behind me at a careful distance until he saw which house I went into, and that everything after that, the gas station, the grocery store, the wave from the truck, had not been coincidence at all. Those had been deliberate. Those had been him showing me that he could be wherever he wanted to be. Those had been him watching to see what I would do. Curtis was charged with violating his release and with stalking, and he is in prison again. And I have been told he will be in prison for several years. And I have been told I will be notified when he is released. And I was given a list of resources for victims that I keep in a drawer in my kitchen and have not opened since. I moved out of that house within a month. I moved to a different city. I do not say which one. I changed my phone number. I closed my private Instagram account entirely. I drive a different car. I do not have a regular coffee shop anymore. I rotate between 4 different ones on different mornings, and I never sit by the window in any of them. I learned something in that coffee shop in Boise that I want to leave you with tonight. You were taught when you were a child that strangers become dangerous when you give them something: your name, your phone number, a ride, a piece of candy, a way into your life. That is not always true. Sometimes a stranger becomes dangerous the moment you look up from your phone and let them see your face, and you do not know it is happening, and you cannot take it back. And the only thing you can do for the rest of your life is try to never be that easy to find again.
Everyone tells you that breakups are sad, that you cry for a few weeks, that you delete the photos, that you eat ice cream and watch sad movies, and then one morning you wake up and you feel a little lighter, and you tell yourself you are going to be okay, and most of the time you are. But what nobody tells you is that some people do not accept a breakup the way other people do. That for some people, the end of a relationship is not an ending at all. It is simply the moment they stop being your boyfriend and start being something else, something quieter, something patient,
Something that waits in a parked car at 3 in the morning and does not say a single word. And the most terrifying thing about that kind of person is that he used to know what you sounded like when you said you loved him. This story might make you think very carefully about who you let close to you and how easily you gave them your address and what they still know about your life that you have not been able to take back. My name is Jenna. I was 28 years old, and I was living in a small 2-bedroom house I rented with one roommate in a quiet residential part of Raleigh, North Carolina, working as an elementary school teacher, going to spin class on Tuesday and Thursday nights, leading a normal, quiet, predictable life that I had built very carefully after my last bad relationship ended 3 years before. I had been single for almost 2 years when I met Mark. I met him on a dating app. He was 31. He was a regional sales manager for a company that sold medical equipment. He had a clean profile with normal photos. He had a stable job. He was polite on the first date. He opened doors. He asked good questions. He laughed at my jokes, and he texted the next morning to thank me for the evening. And after years of guys who never followed up, who ghosted, who could not commit to a Friday plan, Mark felt like a relief. We dated for 6 months. The first 3 months were good, genuinely good. He was attentive. He was thoughtful. He remembered things I had mentioned in passing. He brought me soup when I had a cold. He told me about his family. He told me about a difficult breakup he had gone through 2 years before. He cried a little when he talked about it, and I held his hand, and I told him that I understood. And I thought I was getting to know somebody real. The next 3 months were different. It was small things at first, the kind of things you do not notice when you're inside a relationship and only see clearly when you look back later. He started getting upset when I made plans without him. He started checking my phone when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He started making jokes about my friends that did not feel like jokes. He started asking me to come over to his house instead of me coming to my house, even though my house was closer to both of our jobs. And when I asked him why, he told me it was nothing, that he just liked his own space. And I let it go. He started showing up at my school. I had never asked for the address. I had only told him the name of the school once in passing. But he showed up one Friday afternoon at pickup, standing by the front gate with a bouquet of flowers, smiling at me, and a few of the parents saw, and a few of my coworkers saw, and I had to smile and walk over and accept the flowers and pretend it was sweet. And that night I told him gently that he should not show up at my workplace unannounced, and he got very quiet on the phone. And then he told me I was making him feel like he couldn't love me the way he wanted to. And I apologized, and I felt sick. And I knew somewhere underneath everything that I had to end it. I broke up with him on a Sunday afternoon at a coffee shop, in public, the way the articles tell you to do it. I was kind. I told him I was not in a place for the kind of relationship he wanted. I told him deserved somebody who could give him more than I could. I did not raise my voice. I did not list his faults. I did everything you are supposed to do. And he sat across from me and he listened. And when I was done, he just nodded slowly and he said very calmly that he understood and that he hoped I would change my mind and that he would be ready when I did. I told him I would not change my mind. He smiled. He said, "We will see." And he stood up and he left the coffee shop. And I sat there for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself drive home, because something about the way he had said it had made my arms feel cold. The first thing showed up on my porch 4 days later. It was a small wrapped box, the kind of box jewelry comes in, and inside was a silver bracelet I had once admired in a store window when we had been walking together 3 months earlier, a bracelet I had pointed at and said was pretty, a bracelet I had not thought about since. There was a note inside. The note said, "You said you liked this one." No signature, no name, just my own words written back to me in his handwriting on a small folded piece of paper.
and I stood on my porch holding that box for a long time, and I finally walked it down to the trash can at the end of the driveway, and I threw the whole thing in. The second thing showed up a week later. It was a paperback book. A copy of a novel I had told him on our second date was my favorite. A novel I had not mentioned to him again in the entire 6 months we had dated, and he had remembered, and he had bought a copy, and he had left it on my welcome mat with a small post-it note on the cover that said only, "In case you needed something to read tonight." I called him that afternoon. I told him to stop. I told him I did not want any gifts. I told him the relationship was over and that he needed to respect that. And he was very calm on the phone, and he told me he was just being thoughtful, and he told me he was not trying to upset me, and he told me he would stop. And I believed him, because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was something I was not ready to look at yet. He did not stop. A small potted succulent appeared on my porch 2 weeks later, with a note that said, "I remembered you said your last one died." And I had not told him about a succulent. I had no memory of ever telling him about a succulent, but I had clearly told him about a succulent at some point. 6 months of conversations is a lot of conversations, and he had remembered, and he had bought a new one, and he had brought it to my house in the night. A photograph of the two of us at a state park framed appeared the week after that. A jar of homemade strawberry jam, the kind from a farmer's market we had gone to together, appeared the week after that. A small handwritten letter, 4 pages long, telling me that he was not angry, that he understood I needed time, that he would wait for as long as it took, that he forgave me for the things I had said at the coffee shop, things I had not actually said, things he had imagined I had said, appeared the week after that. I called the police after the letter. The officer who came to the house was a woman in her 40s. She was patient, she read every note, she looked at every gift I had kept, she took photographs of all of it, and she told me what officers always have to tell women in this situation, that until he made a direct threat or trespassed on the property I could prove or made physical contact, the most they could do was document the reports. But she also told me to apply for a restraining order immediately, and she gave me the paperwork, and she told me to keep every single thing he ever sent me from this point forward. I filed the restraining order paperwork the next morning. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In those 3 weeks, the gifts kept coming, almost every other day. Smaller things now. A single flower, a packaged muffin from a bakery we had gone to together, a Starbucks gift card with a note that said, "Your usual." And I documented every one of them. I photographed them, I dated them, I built a folder. And I started keeping every curtain in the house closed, and I started parking my car in the garage, and I started asking my roommate to walk to the mailbox with me, and I started sleeping with my phone in my hand. The night before the restraining order hearing, my roommate woke me up at 3:15 in the morning. She had gotten up to get water from the kitchen, and she had looked out the front window without thinking, the way you sometimes do when you are half asleep. And there was a car parked across the street from our house, a car she recognized, his car, his black sedan, and he was sitting in the driver's seat, and the interior light was on, and he was not on his phone, he was not reading anything, he was just sitting there, looking at our house. We called 911. We did not turn on any lights. We did not open any curtains. We sat together in the hallway in the middle of the house, and I called the dispatcher in a whisper, and she stayed on the line with me for almost 11 minutes until I heard the police cars pull up outside, and I heard car doors, and I heard a man's voice, and I heard him say, very politely, "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle." He did not run. He did not fight. He stepped out of the car, and he was calm and he was polite, and he told the officers he had simply been driving home and had stopped to make a phone call, and the officers asked him whose house he was parked in front of, and he said he did not know, and the officers asked him for his name, and he gave it, and they ran it, and they saw the pending restraining order, and they arrested him. The hearing happened the next afternoon. The restraining order was granted. He was ordered to stay 500 feet away from me, from my home, from my workplace, from my school, and he was ordered not to contact me by any means, not by phone, not by mail, not by message, not through any third party. and he stood in the courtroom in a clean shirt with his hands folded in front of him, and he did not look angry, and he did not look upset. He just looked at me across the room with the same calm, patient expression he had worn at the coffee shop the day I broke up with him. He violated the order 4 times in the first 6 months. A drive-by past my school, a phone call from a number I did not recognize, a card sent to my parents' house in another state with no return address, a single text from a burner number that said only, "I am still here." He was charged each time. After the 4th violation, he served a short jail sentence, and after that, the contact stopped. And I have not heard from him in almost 2 years, and I do not know if that means he has moved on, or if it means he has gotten more careful, or if it means he is simply waiting, the way he told me at the coffee shop he would wait. I moved out of that house. I moved out of Raleigh entirely. I took a job at a different elementary school in a different state, and I told my new coworkers nothing about my last relationship. I do not have any photos of him anywhere. I closed every social media account I had ever shared with him. I changed my phone number twice. I have a P.O. box now instead of a home address on any document I can avoid putting it on. And I have a security system, and I have a deadbolt, and I have a chain and a doorbell camera that I check before I open the door for anyone. I learned something in that house in Raleigh that I want to leave you with tonight. The last thing I will say. When somebody you used to love decides not to let you go, the most frightening thing is not the gifts on the porch. It is not the car at 3 in the morning. It is not the letter he writes you that he is sure you will eventually understand. The most frightening thing is that he already knows what you look like when you are sleeping, and he already knows the sound of your laugh, and he already knows the names of the people you call when you are scared, and you cannot take any of that back. You can only move and lock the door and hope that the version of you he is still in love with is a version he eventually stops being able to find.